Rhett Lawson hadn't planned on surviving another winter until two barefoot twins thrust a chipped bowl of soup into his hands beneath a derelict boxcar. Ellie and Owen were 8 fierce-eyed and fatherless, and their trade was simple a roof for a papa's promise. Rhett's hope lay buried with his ranch, but saying yes set him on a collision course with Magnus Cole, the broadcloth wolf who claimed every broken homestead for miles. This is how one drifter, 4 hungry kids, and a shack made of stubborn love turned a Colorado winter into a fight no amount of money could win. The wind carried no promise that winter, just cold, hunger, and silence, until two barefoot twins with hollow bellies and wide hearts gave an old drifter a reason to keep breathing. He was asleep beneath the busted remains of a boxcar when the voice called out. Not loud, not scared, just certain. You dead or sleeping, mister? The rancher opened his eyes slow. There weren't many reasons to anymore. Not since the frost claimed his cattle and loneliness stole the rest. His name was Rhett, though nobody said it out loud in over a year, and the name barely fit him anymore. Just like his boots, too loose now from all the walking and not enough eating. The voice came again, closer now, a girl's voice, scratchy from dust or just life. We got some soup as long as you don't mind sharing it with dogs. Rhett sat up too fast. Hunger made him stupid. But when he looked, there weren't no dogs, just 2 thin kids, twins by the look of it, freckled and wiry and maybe 8 years old, if that. One boy, one girl. The girl held a chipped enamel bowl like it was treasure, her thumb inside to keep it from spilling. Steam curled from it, thin and ghost-like. The boy was staring not with fear, but the kind of look only orphans give, like they done seen too much already. And you were just one more maybe that might go sideways. Rhett cleared his throat. Ain't dead. Figured, said the girl, offering him the bowl. Dead folks don't move when you poke 'em. He took it slow, cautious, careful not to spill a drop. He hadn't seen meat in weeks, but the broth was warm, and there were bits of something floating. Maybe potato, maybe not. Didn't matter. The boy sat cross-legged in the dirt. We've been watching you, he said. You've been sleeping out here 3 nights. Ain't seen nobody bring you food. You ain't got no people. Rhett drank, swallowed. The warmth hit his chest like a stove finally lit. He didn't answer right away. No, he said at last. Ain't got nobody. The girl glanced at the boy. They both nodded, like that settled something. Well, she said, we ain't got a papa. You ain't got a home. Figure we could share, Rhett blinked. You want me to come with you? The boy shrugged. Ain't like the chickens are scared of you. You're too skinny to do much damage. They weren't smiling, not really, but there was something in the way they stood there barefoot in the dirt coats, 2 short clothes, patched with mismatched thread and stubborn hope. Rhett finished the bowl. His hands were shaking, but not from cold. Where's your ma? He asked. Gone, said the girl. Got sick, got worse. Then the preacher man said she was with the angels now. Left us the house and chickens and 2 dogs. Rhett's stomach twisted, but not from hunger this time. The boy stood. Houses still got firewood, and the roof only leaks when it rains real bad. The girl took the empty bowl. You common or not, he looked at them, dusty, determined, desperate, but brave in that way, only children could be when they didn't know how much they were risking. He nodded. They started walking. The house was more shack than anything a mile off the old logging trail, half hidden behind a crumbling fence, and a pear tree that hadn't borne fruit in 3 years. The dogs barked when they approached, but only once. Then they sniffed Rhett's boots and laid back down. Inside, the air was warmer than he expected, smelled like boiled flour and chimney smoke. A pot sat on the hearth with more broth, and a crooked cot had been made near the fire. The girl pointed at it. That's yours. We got beds. Rhett hesitated. You sure about this? The boy looked up from feeding the fire. You got any better options? Rhett didn't. He stayed. That first night he laid awake on the cot, eyes on the ceiling, where spiderwebs caught light from the fire. He hadn't slept under a roof in months, not since the bank took the last ranch, and the dust claimed what cattle hadn't starved. He listened to the twins breathe steady, rhythmic like wind in tall grass. Next morning the girl handed him a tin cup of weak coffee. He drank it like it was gold. You any good with wood cutting? She asked. Rhett nodded. The boy handed him an axe. By noon, he'd split a week's worth. By dusk, the dogs followed him like he'd always belonged. And that night, when he sat to eat, there was meat in the stew. Rabbit, said the boy. Caught it myself. Rhett smiled. Bet it didn't see you coming. The girl leaned over. Your face looks better when it smiles. Rhett nearly choked. The days began to settle into rhythm. Not easy, not slow, but a rhythm all the same. Rhett rose before the sun, his bones stiff and loud in his own ears, but his hands remembered. A man who'd once run a ranch, even a dying one, still knew how to mend fence-haul water and check snares before breakfast. He did it quietly without asking, like he was still waiting for someone to come and tell him he didn't belong. But no one came. The twins, for all their small allness, moved with purpose too. Ellie the girl was forever sweeping, folding, ribbling what didn't need boiling, chasing chickens out of the house, like she'd been born 40 years older than she was. Her brother Owen was quieter in his labor. He tracked, watched, learned. When he spoke, it wasn't to fill space. He asked questions that cut to bone. One morning, while Rhett scraped a dented kettle clean, Owen sat on a crate near the doorway, arms folded. Why don't you talk much about before? Rhett didn't look up. Don't know if it matters. Owen kicked at a stone. I think it does. Ellie says you talk in your sleep. Say a woman's name sometimes. Rhett's breath caught. He didn't deny it. Owen didn't press, just stood and walked off. But that night, Ellie added an extra blanket to Rhett's cot. The thing about grief was that it didn't soften with time. It just went quiet, hid behind walls built of work and silence. Rhett had done his best to leave it behind when the fever took Annie. But every now and then, Ellie would hum a tune while stirring broth, and he'd freeze because that was Annie's tune too. Or Owen would roll his sleeves in the exact same way his son used to before checking fence wire. Rhett knew it was a trap, the comfort, that slow tug toward the idea that maybe he was needed again, because it didn't last. Not for him, not anymore. But he stayed, not out of pity, not even out of kindness. He stayed because they asked, and that was more than anyone else had done in a long time. One frost-bitten dawn, Rhett went out to check the snares and found the trap line disturbed. No rabbit blood, though. Something had gotten there first. He followed the trail, a fox maybe, but lost it past the creek bend where the brush thickened into thorned undergrowth. When he returned, Ellie had a split lip. She tried to hide it behind the kettle, but Owen sat stiff, jaw-clenched face, pale with fury. Rhett crouched low. What happened? Ellie didn't answer, but Owen did. Mr. Magnus Cole's boy came around again, said the house was going to be his come spring soon as the bank turned papers over. Said he didn't care none if we were still here. Rhett stood slowly. He'd heard the name. Miles Magnus Cole mean as they came. Big rancher up north who'd been buying out failing properties for pennies. His son Levi Cole was worse, a bully raised on entitlement and unchecked cruelty. He hit her, Rhett asked. Ellie's shoulders tensed. It don't matter. We got a broom, ran him off. But Rhett could see the tremble in Owen's hands. The boy didn't want to feel helpless again. Rhett's voice was low, steady. Next time he shows you, come get me, you hear. They both nodded, but something cold had said in the cabin that no fire could touch. Rhett went into town that afternoon. He didn't speak much to the people there. Most of them looked right past him, still saw a man who'd lost everything. But he stopped at the general store, bought nails, a new lock, and a length of rope. When the clerk gave him a look, Rhett said nothing, just paid and left. He boarded the windows that night, reinforced the door, fixed the chicken coop so it couldn't be kicked open, taught Owen how to tie a slip knot trap with the new rope. Ellie watched it all, silent expression, unreadable. Later, she brought him tea in a dented tin cup. You used to have a family, she asked. Rhett nodded. She didn't ask more, just sat beside him, hands wrapped around her own mug, letting the silence speak. 3 days passed. Then Magnus Cole's boy came back. It was near dusk, the sun dying behind the ridge. Rhett was hauling wood when he heard the dog bark, not panicked, not startled warning. Rhett dropped the stack, reached for the hatchet he kept near the doorway, and stepped outside. Levi Cole Magnus. Cole stood in the yard, tall for 17 shoulders, puffed teeth bared like he thought it made him look older. 2 friends behind him laughing like hyenas. One had a switch, the other a bottle. Levi Cole swaggered closer. You must be the new pet they took in, he said. Rhett said nothing. Just stood still, hatchet loose in his hand, eyes unreadable. Levi Cole chuckled. House is going to be mine, old man. Ain't nothing you can do. These two brats, they're squatters. You're just the scarecrow they dragged in for show. Still, Rhett didn't speak, but Owen appeared at the doorway, holding the rope trap. Ellie behind him, eyes narrowed. Levi Cole noticed, sneered. Girl thinks she's tough, he muttered. She got teeth, but teeth can break. That's when Rhett moved. Not fast, just deliberate. He walked right up to Levi Cole until they were inches apart. Levi Cole raised the bottle like he meant to swing it. Rhett grabbed his wrist. No wasted motion, no anger, just a squeeze. Levi Cole yelped. The bottle dropped. His friend stopped laughing. Rhett leaned close. You touch that girl again, and I'll break more than your pride. You think your daddy owns this land? Let him come down here. We'll see what the law says. Levi Cole yanked free, red-faced. You're just a bum with a name nobody remembers. Rhett didn't answer. Levi Cole spat, then turned. Come on, he snapped to the others. When they were gone, Rhett stood in the yard a long time, breathing hard, hatchet still in hand. Owen approached. You scared him. Rhett didn't look down. Did I scare you? No, Owen said. You made me feel safe. That night they ate rabbit stew. Ellie added time, and Owen told a story about how one of the chickens had gotten stuck in the privy again. For a moment, laughter returned. But after the twins went to bed, Rhett sat by the fire, watching the shadows move across the walls. Safe never lasted. He knew that better than anyone. Spring didn't come gently. It arrived in fits and starts, gales that tore the frost loose from the creek wind, that howled like a mother grieving, and long weeping rains that turned the fields into mud graveyards for seeds that hadn't yet found the strength to sprout. But the cabin held because of him, because of the twins, because sometimes a home could be stitched together with things as simple as boiled potatoes, silence shared between three people, and a latch that closed tight at night. But trouble doesn't wait for fair weather. The first letter came in the hands of the postman, a boy named Darnell, who didn't want to get off his horse. He stood a good 30 ft from the porch, calling out like it was haunted land he'd stepped onto. Rhett came out squinting against the wind. This for you, Darnell said, holding out a sealed envelope. Bank seal on it. Name says Rhett Coyle. C.O. Granger Property. That you? Rhett nodded once, took it without thanks. The boy turned tail and rode off, not waiting to see it opened. Inside the cabin, he unfolded it slow. The twins didn't ask what it was, but they hovered nearby. Ellie had a bowl of corn to shell. Owen was oiling the latch. Rhett's jaw tightened as he read. Land reclamation, debt transfer. Magnus Cole's name printed at the bottom like a signature from the devil himself. They were going to force auction not just the land, everything on it, unless back taxes were paid. $17.32, a king's ransom for folk like them. He folded the letter and slid it under the kettle on the stove, said nothing. That night, Ellie left a biscuit on his plate longer than she needed to. When he didn't eat it, she packed it away. Owen didn't ask, but his fingers fidgeted with the wood carving Rhett had helped him start last week, a stubby horse with crooked legs. The next day, they walked to town. Rhett didn't say they were going, just left at dawn, and let his footsteps tell the twins whether they were coming. They followed without a word. The walk was 4 miles, mostly uphill, past the old oaks that hadn't sprouted since the big fire. They took it slow, not from weakness, but from knowing they had to arrive looking strong. Town was louder now. More folks coming in from outer ridges heard swelling, and Magnus Cole's men strutted through like they were born into crowns. The bank was clean, too clean, like it didn't want anything human to stick to it. Rhett went inside alone. The clerk behind the counter looked up once, eyes flicking over his patched coat and lined face, and said, You'll need an appointment. I need a word, Rhett said low. Not without now. Something in the way he said. It made the man blink and gesture toward the back. Inside the manager's office, Magnus Cole himself stood behind the desk, arms crossed like he'd expected him. Well, now, he said, the ghost speaks. Rhett didn't sit. You want the land? You come take it from my hands. Don't hide behind papers. Magnus Cole grinned. I'm not hiding. I'm just finishing what your failures began. That land ain't yours. Not on paper. Not in court. You want to pay it off. Fine, bring the money. You got 7 days. Rhett's voice was gravel. I pay. It stays mine. You pay. The law says I can't touch it, but you won't, will you? Not unless you got money hid somewhere under them boots. Rhett didn't answer. He left without another word. Ellie and Owen waited outside, seated on a bench with their hands tucked between their knees. Neither asked anything until they were out of town and halfway down the trail again. Is it real bad? Ellie asked. Yes, Rhett said. Owen glanced up. You going to leave us? Rhett stopped walking. His eyes burned not with tears, but something older. I stayed because you asked, and now you need me, so I'll stay. Ellie nodded as if that was the answer she needed. But when they got back, the worry returned like an old wound. Over the next few days, Rhett tried everything he could think of, traded old tools for feed, sold his boots, and wore wraps instead. Worked the neighbor-esque broken well for coins, but it came slow, too slow. One evening, Ellie came to him with her coin box, just a wooden jar with faded stickers on the side. I got 82 cents, she said. We were saving for a new chicken, but I'd rather keep the house. He didn't take it, just wrapped her fingers back around the jar. You earned that. We earned the house too, she said. He couldn't argue. But the day before the deadline, they were still $5 short, and that's when Rhett did what he promised himself he never would. He went to the auction barn. The place was filthy with voices, men shouting over each other, trading calves like marbles whiskey on their breath, bets placed faster than coins could land. Rhett stepped up to the board. The man behind it looked him over. You got something to sell? He asked. Rhett held out the pocket watch. Gold heavy old. It had been Annie's father's, the only thing he hadn't sold after the fever took her. The man whistled low. Where'd you get this? Rhett didn't answer. Don't matter. I'll give you 5 for it. Rhett didn't flinch. 7. The man scratched his beard. 6. Rhett nodded, took the bills. Outside. He leaned against the barn wall, breathing like he'd been punched. Later that night, when the twins asked where the watch was, he lied. Said he lost it on the trail. Ellie didn't believe him, but she didn't press. They paid the bank the next morning, and the clerk, annoyed at being proven wrong, stamped the deed with more force than needed. You're lucky, he muttered. Rhett didn't feel lucky, but they had the land for now. The following week, storms rolled in, real ones. Thunder that shook the panes, rain that poured like judgment. The creek rose and the roof leaked, and the hens stopped laying. Rhett caught pneumonia. Ellie found him slumped over by the shed teeth, chattering face gray. They dragged him inside together, her pulling, Owen pushing. For 3 days, he burned with fever, muttering things neither twin understood. Names, places, Annie their son. Ellie soaked rags and prayed out loud. Owen sat near the door, shotgun across his knees in case Magnus Cole came again. On the 4th morning, Rhett opened his eyes. He didn't speak right away, just reached for the girl's hand. You didn't leave, he whispered. Ellie cried without making a sound. That night, as Rhett lay awake, the fire low, and his breath still shallow, he saw something he hadn't dared think about in years. Family, not the kind you're born into, the kind that finds you on a dirt road lost and worn and says, we've got room. But it never comes easy, and they hadn't seen the last of Magnus Cole, not by a long mile. The fever broke, but not without leaving a cost. Rhett rose slow those next mornings. The sharp edge of his walk dulled his grip on the axe handle, unsteady, and his voice scratchier than the wind through brittle trees. He didn't complain. He never had, but the cabin noticed. The way Ellie stepped quieter now, watching him from corners of the room. The way Owen hovered near the shed when Rhett went out to chop wood, always pretending to hammer something, but never straying far. The rains kept coming. Not every day, but enough to rot fence posts and turn the chicken yard into soup. The creek behind the barn grew louder, clawing at its banks. The cabin floor never dried. There was a smell of mildew creeping in along with the spring. But something else crept in too. Something quieter, harder to name. Closeness. The kind that sneaks up after you've walked a hard road together, bled on the same earth, fought the same ghosts. Ellie stopped keeping her shoes under her cot and started leaving them by the door next to his. Owen began calling the horse Ours instead of the horse. Rhett caught himself humming when he cooked a tune he didn't recognize, but that Ellie swore came from her mama once. Then came the package. A square box wrapped in brown paper, left at the gatepost without a name. Owen spotted it while gathering kindling and ran back holding it like it might explode. Rhett opened it slow. Inside, a clean shirt, a tin of tobacco, a loaf of bread, still warm, and a folded scrap of paper. No words, just a charcoal drawing of the cabin, sketched with shaky hands. Ellie turned it over. "Someone's watching us," she whispered. Rhett didn't answer, but he lit the stove early that night and sat facing the window. He sat there long after the fire died down. Next morning he found tracks. Small ones, boot prints child-sized, just near the creek bank, close enough to the cabin to watch, far enough to stay hidden. He followed them halfway to the ridge before they vanished. "Could be one of the neighbors," Ellie offered. Rhett shook his head. "Ain't no neighbors that small or shy." Later that week, the second package came. A slingshot made of fresh-cut yew, sanded smooth and strung with twine, wrapped in a rag and tied with string. Owen found it and lit up like a lantern. "It's for me," he said, hugging it close. Ellie wasn't so sure. People don't give things without wanting something back. She was right. The third package came with a note, not written, etched into bark. A single word: help. Rhett's stomach tightened. He scanned the tree line, the ridge, the hill beyond the pasture. Something stirred there, a shadow in the woods that didn't belong to any animal. That night he didn't sleep. When the twins nodded off, he took the shotgun and went out to the porch. He waited in the cold moonlight, painting the ground in silver bones. Nothing until dawn. The sound was too soft to be hoofbeats, more like shuffling. He stepped off the porch. There under the big elm, a girl stood barefoot. She was no more than 10, dressed, torn eyes, hollow arms wrapped tight around a baby, no older than 2. Behind her, 2 boys, maybe twins themselves, clung to her skirt. Rhett lowered the shotgun. The girl didn't flinch. "You the man that helped the twins?" she asked. Rhett said nothing. "'Cause we don't got nowhere else." He turned to look back at the cabin. Inside, Owen and Ellie were stirring, the smell of oats rising. Rhett stepped aside. "Come in." They ate like they hadn't tasted bread in a week. Rhett didn't ask where they came from. Not at first. He watched the way the girl spooned food into the baby's mouth before feeding herself. The way the boys sat straight, not because they were raised to, but because they'd been taught what happened if they didn't. Later, after the dishes were done and the others napping, Rhett asked. The girl's name was Hazel. Her brothers were Abe and Jamie. The baby, she said, was her cousin Lark. Their parents were gone, not buried, not missing, just gone. No letters, no signs. The shack they'd lived in up the hollow had been burned. No one in town asked why. Rhett didn't ask either. Some stories you didn't need to hear to understand. He laid out blankets for them. Ellie shared her extra socks. Owen gave up the cot and said he'd sleep by the fire. No one argued. In one day, the family doubled. For the first time, the cabin didn't feel too big. But trouble didn't shrink. It came again in the form of Magnus Cole. He showed up 3 days later, not with papers, not with threats, but with a bottle and a smile. Rhett was fixing the fence post when he arrived, riding a chestnut stallion too fine for a man like him. "Well, well," Magnus Cole said. "Looks like you're running a whole orphanage now." Rhett didn't answer, just kept hammering. "You always had a savior complex," Magnus Cole mused. "But this ain't going to end well, Rhett. You know it. They'll eat you alive. Kids don't make a man better. They bury him." Rhett drove the nail in deep. Magnus Cole leaned forward in the saddle. "You sell me the land now. I'll throw in the saloon up in Haskell. You can drink away your charity and die quiet." Rhett finally looked up. "Get off my property." Magnus Cole chuckled. "It's always a show with you." "Fine, but I'll be back. Not with offers, with law." He turned the horse and rode off slow. That night, Rhett couldn't eat. He sat with the ledger open on the table, scribbling figures that didn't add up. Too many mouths, too little income. Ellie came up beside him. "We'll work," she said. "All of us, you ain't alone." And they did. In the days that followed, they became a machine. Ellie and Hazel took to the coop, cleaning it, fixing it, coaxing the hens into laying again. Owen and the boys cleared brush, carried water, tended traps. Rhett taught them how to cut timber without splintering it, how to braid rope that wouldn't snap, how to watch the weather by the clouds and not the calendar. They built something no bank could put a price on, a rhythm, a life. But life doesn't ask if you're ready before it hands you the next blow. One morning, Hazel screamed. Lark wouldn't wake up. Rhett ran to the cot. The baby was pale lips, blue breathing, shallow fever was rising fast. He bundled her up and rode hard for the nearest town with a doctor. When he arrived, the man barely glanced up. "Don't take kids," the doctor said. Rhett slammed his hand on the counter. "She's dying." The doctor frowned. "And I'm not a charity. You pay or you leave." Rhett reached into his coat, took out the last thing he owned of value. The blade from his belt-carved handle, passed down from his father's father. He placed it on the counter. The doctor hesitated, then took the blade and pointed. Back room. 3 hours later, the fever broke. Rhett sat beside the crib, head bowed. When he returned to the cabin, Lark in his arms, the others rushed out screaming with joy. Ellie wept. Hazel hugged him tight and wouldn't let go. That night they didn't sleep much. They sat around the fire telling stories, singing quiet songs. Even Rhett cracked a smile when Owen tried to teach the boys how to whistle. But outside, past the flickering window light, Magnus Cole watched. And this time he wasn't alone. The moon hung low, fat and yellow when the dogs began barking. Rhett was up before his boots were on, shotgun in hand, moving toward the door, before the others had even stirred. The bark wasn't panicked. It was angry, like the hounds had spotted something they recognized but didn't trust. When he stepped onto the porch, the hairs on the back of his neck rose like iron to lightning. The front gate was open. The dogs were circling near the edge of the pasture, hackles, raised eyes fixed on something deeper in the brush. And though the brush itself showed no movement, the wind carried with it a smell Rhett hadn't sensed in years: grease, old leather, and riverbank whiskey. Not the kind a man drinks for warmth, but the kind a coward drinks to burn his conscience clean. He waited long enough to hear nothing. No breath, no bootsteps, no rustle of foliage. But he knew better than to trust silence, especially in a place where trouble made a habit of arriving when a man's back was turned. By morning, Magnus Cole's mark was left plain. On the fence post near the front gate, someone had carved a snake-coiled fangs out, the symbol Magnus Cole used back in the mining towns when a man owed him and didn't pay. Rhett didn't show the others. He burned the post instead, chopped it down, set it in the fire, watched the flame chew through the wood until only black ash remained. But the signs kept coming. A few days later, the hens were all dead. Slit necks left in a line beside the coop like some warning. The day after that, the only milking goat they had was gone. Rope cut gate open. Each time, Rhett did what he could to cover the damage. He buried the hens, told Ellie they'd caught a sickness. He blamed the missing goat on wolves. He smiled when the children asked if everything was all right. But they weren't stupid. Not anymore. Ellie began watching the tree line, same as him. Hazel kept the younger ones inside more. Owen built traps without being told. No one said Magnus Cole's name out loud, but the whole cabin breathed it like smoke. Then came the fire. It started at the shed. Rhett had been in the woods with Owen gathering pine. They saw the smoke just past the ridge, rising like a signal. He ran until his chest burned, until the wind in his ears was drowned by the roar of flame. By the time they reached the cabin, the shed was nothing but a skeleton of crackling beams. The barn roof was smoking but hadn't caught. Ellie and Hazel had hauled buckets, formed a line. Even little Jamie had black on his face from the ash. Lark sat on the porch, coughing, wrapped in a blanket. Rhett didn't speak. He just grabbed a bucket and joined them. Hours later, when the last cinder hissed into steam, he went out back alone. He knelt in the field and stared up at the sky, fists clenched, jaw set. "I gave it up," he whispered. "I gave it all up, and still he follows." A voice behind him. "What you give up?" It was Ellie. He didn't turn, just closed his eyes. "Revenge," he said. "That life, the anger, the pride." She knelt beside him. "You didn't give it up. You buried it. And now it's crawling out." Rhett looked at her, then really looked. And in that moment, the wind shifted. The fire hadn't taken the home, not all of it, and they'd saved the barn, but the message was clear. Magnus Cole wasn't trying to buy the land anymore. He was trying to burn them out. Rhett gathered the children that night. "We're not leaving," he said. "Not for him, not for anyone, but we're not waiting around to burn." They reinforced the fences, dug ditches, made oil lamps to line the perimeter. Owen tied cans to string across the tree line to make alarms. Ellie sharpened the kitchen knives. Hazel carved slingshots for the boys. Rhett found his father's old rifle and cleaned it by lamplight. That week, they slept in shifts. One night, Ellie and Rhett sat on the porch together, each holding a cup of weak tea, both listening to the wind. "He's not after just the land," she said. Rhett nodded. "He wants to take everything I built." "You didn't build it alone." Rhett looked at her. "No," he said. "Not anymore. That was the night the letters started, scrolled in charcoal on scraps of cloth nailed to trees left at the gate. Leave while you can. You got no right to thumb K's. You ain't no family. We'll bury you all. Rhett took each letter and fed it to the fire, but the last one he kept because it wasn't written in Magnus Cole's hand. It was in Owen. They found the boy behind the barn face, twisted in shame. He made me, Owen said, voice shaking. Said if I didn't leave notes, he'd hurt Ellie. Said he'd take the baby and throw her in the creek. Rhett kneeled. You didn't do wrong, son. You did scared. Owen sobbed. Rhett wrapped his arms around him and held tight. We're going to protect each other. That's what family means. After that, Owen didn't flinch when he saw the tree line. That next Sunday, Rhett lit a prayer, the first since he'd taken in the twins. They sat in the living room holding hands, heads bowed. Lord, Rhett said, we ain't got much, but we got each other. Give us strength to keep it. They all said, Amen. And they meant it. Then came the storm, not of weather, of men. Just before dawn, they heard the hooves. Rhett was already outside, boots on rifle loaded. Ellie joined him with a lantern. Hazel stood on the porch with the slingshot ready. Owen had the pitchfork. Magnus Cole rode at the front of 7 men, each one armed, each one grinning like wolves at a chicken pen. Rhett stepped forward calm. You bring a law, man. Magnus Cole smiled. No law needs coming where no law was made. This here is my land now. Rhett raised the rifle. No, he said. It's mine. Magnus Cole laughed. 1 man against 7. Rhett didn't answer. He just stepped aside. Behind him, the cabin door swung open. Ellie, Hazel, Owen, the boy's even Lark, sat in her basket clutching a spoon. Rhett's voice was steady. Not 1 man a family. Magnus Cole's face twitched. You ain't got a deed. I got hands that built this house. I got hearts that call it home. That's deed enough. The wind picked up. The dogs began barking. Then came the shot. Not from Magnus Cole, not from Rhett, but from the tree line. A warning shot high and wide. Magnus Cole spun. Who's out there? More shots rang out. This time closer. Bark exploded from the tree beside Magnus Cole's horse. One of his men turned and rode, then another. Within seconds, 4 were gone. The remaining 3 looked around confused. Rhett's voice cut the dawn. You made enemies, Magnus Cole, not just me. The trees moved. Out stepped figures, old miners, former ranch hands, a preacher with a rifle, a woman Rhett recognized from town holding a bow. One by one, those who Magnus Cole had wronged had come to stand behind Rhett. Magnus Cole's horse danced nervously. You think this ends it? He spat. You think this makes you safe? Rhett raised the rifle. No, but it makes you gone. Magnus Cole glared, then turned his horse and rode. He didn't look back. Rhett lowered the rifle and exhaled. Behind him, Ellie reached for his hand. They stood there as the sun rose over the ridge, the light catching on the smoke from the old shed on the barn roof patched with tin on the new fence they'd built together. Ellie spoke barely above a whisper. We ain't got a lot. Rhett nodded, but we got each other. And for the first time in a long while, peace settled in. But peace is fragile, and something darker still waited down the trail. The cabin settled into a quiet, that week a hush not born of fear, but of exhaustion. After the standoff, after Magnus Cole vanished into the woods with his threats melting on the wind, there wasn't a soul in the house that didn't fall into sleep like stones dropped into a well. Even Rhett, who hadn't known a full night's rest since the day the twins first pulled on his coat, found himself waking past sunrise, with no recollection of the hours between. But peace, like the first frost, rarely lingers long in places where blood has been stirred. The morning after their first night of calm, Ellie woke early and opened the front door to find a satchel sitting on the porch. No note, no tracks, no noise. She carried it inside and laid it on the table. Its worn leather buckled shut, smelling faintly of tobacco and rain. Rhett took one look and stiffened. What is it? Ellie asked. He didn't answer. Just opened the satchel slow, as if the thing might bite. Inside was a thick journal bound in cracked hide, and beneath it a bundle of letters. Rhett didn't touch the letters. His hand hovered, then closed into a fist and fell away. Ellie watched him. You know what it is? He nodded once. They're from her. The children stirred their morning routine, rolling into motion, unaware that the ghosts of Rhett's past had been laid on the breakfast table like offerings. Ellie waited until they were all outside. Hazel helping Owen with the chickens, Jamie trying to carry a sloshing pail of water, bigger than he was, before she sat down beside him. He opened the journal. The handwriting was hers. Not the fine, clean hand of a school teacher or proper wife, but a rougher scrawl, sharp angles like a woman who'd learned to write out of necessity, not vanity. The entries were dated, some from months ago, others from years past. Ellie read a line aloud. "Rhett, if you ever find this, I'm sorry. I didn't know how to stay, and I didn't know how to leave, so I ran and I kept running." He took the journal and closed it gently. "She was the mother of the twins?" Ellie asked, though she already knew. Rhett nodded. "She ran when they were just babies. Said she couldn't live this life. Hard dirt, harder days. I searched for weeks, months, came back with nothing but dust in an empty crib." And Magnus Cole Rhett's face darkened. "She fell in with him. Whether by choice or by fear, I never knew. But he kept her out of reach until she died." Ellie laid a hand on his arm. "She left them with you. She didn't leave them. She left me." He said it like it hurt more than it should have, even after all these years. Ellie stood and walked to the window. Outside, the twins were giggling. Jamie trying to run with a chicken under each arm. Lark sitting in the grass with her chubby hands full of flowers. Hazel was drawing in the dirt with a stick. Owen watching. "She didn't leave them," Ellie repeated, "or she'd have taken them with her. She knew they'd be safe here with you." Rhett didn't respond, just looked down at the journal again. That night, after the children had gone to bed and the oil lamp flickered low, Rhett took the journal to the barn and sat on a hell and began to read. Not out of guilt, not out of longing, but out of need. He needed to understand the storm that had shaped the first years of his children's lives, the silence that had wrapped itself around them like a second skin. He needed to know how a woman could love fiercely and still flee. The journal told of nights spent hiding in mining camps, always looking over her shoulder. Of Magnus Cole's threats, his fists, his voice like gravel. It told of her watching the twins sleep from a distance once, while Rhett chopped wood, afraid to be seen, afraid to stay gone. It told of her death, her last entry scrolled in shaking hand. "If I don't make it to spring, tell them I never stopped loving them. Tell them I prayed for them every day. Tell them they're mine, even if I wasn't brave enough to be theirs." Rhett closed the book with tears tracking down his face. He'd shed many tears in his life. Grief, rage, loneliness. But these were different. These were the tears of a man learning that even abandonment could come from love. When he came back into the cabin, Ellie was waiting. "I know what I have to do," he said. She didn't ask what, because she already knew. Rhett rode out before dawn the next morning. No one heard him leave except Ellie, who watched from the window as his silhouette disappeared down the trail. He went to town first, not for supplies, not for news, but for paper ink envelopes. He wrote 5 letters, one to the sheriff, one to the school teacher, one to the judge, one to the reverend, and one to the land office. Each one told the story of a man who had lived without roots, who'd built a home, not out of boards and nails, but out of second chances. A man who had taken in children not because it was his duty, but because he'd looked in their eyes and seen a reason to stay alive. He signed every letter the same: Rhett Lawson, father. Then he rode to the old graveyard at the edge of Dry Creek Valley, the one where no names marked the stones, only dates and weather-worn crosses. He dug a small hole beneath the oldest tree, laid the journal there, and covered it with earth. "You're home now," he whispered, and he rode back. At the homestead, Ellie waited with the twins, her apron smeared with flour, the smell of baking bread thick in the air. The children ran to him, all speaking at once. "Did you see the big owl again?" Jamie stole another egg. "Lark won't stop calling the cow, ma'am, moo." He listened, laughed, lifted Bee onto his shoulder, and walked inside. That night he told them a story of a woman brave enough to love even when the world was cruel. Of a man too proud to see her pain, of children who became his saving grace. He didn't say her name, but the twins knew. And when he was done, they crawled into his arms and fell asleep against his chest. Ellie sat nearby, silent. Later, she took his hand. "You did right." "No," he said. "I did what I should have done long ago." She leaned her head on his shoulder. Outside, thunder rolled far off, a new storm still hours away. Rhett didn't flinch, because this time he wasn't standing alone. The day the papers came through was no different from any other. Gray sky, a slow drizzle softening the earth, the kind of chill that worked into a man's bones by noon. Rhett had almost forgotten the letters he'd sent, almost convinced himself the world would roll on without answering. But fate, when it finally did knock, came quiet as a breath. Hazel spotted the writer first. She was hanging clothes on the line, her sleeves rolled high, arms blotched red from the cold wash bucket. At first she thought it was one of the townsmen, maybe the postmaster on his usual round, but the writer wore a long coat too fine for a mail carrier, and he sat his horse like someone who wasn't used to being told no. She ran for the cabin. By the time Rhett stepped out, the writer had already dismounted and was tying off his horse at the hitch. He wasn't a tall man, nor thin, but solid and middle-aged, with a scar running along his temple like a pale thread. The badge on his vest flashed silver. Rhett Lawson. I am. The man pulled an envelope from inside his coat. My name's Marshall Dempsey. Got something here for you from Judge Holler. Rhett took it slow, tearing the paper open with steady fingers. He didn't speak as he read, his eyes scanning each line like a man measuring fence posts, counting every word twice to be sure. Ellie stepped out onto the porch behind him, wiping her hands on her apron. Well, she asked. Rhett turned the letter so she could see. His voice didn't tremble, but his hand did. It's done. Ellie's brow creased. Done. They made it official. The twins, they're mine now. Legal permanent. Ain't a man alive who can take M. He looked over his shoulder toward the pasture where Bee and Lark were trying to pull Owen into a game of stick tag. Rhett folded the letter and pressed it to his chest like a prayer. They're mine. Marshall Dempsey cleared his throat, uneasy. There's more. Rhett looked up. The judge signed off. Yes, but there's still an inquiry open about Magnus Cole. He's not just a nuisance anymore. He's gone from threatening homesteads to suspected cattle-rustling land theft, and they think maybe a murder down by Mule Pass. They're putting a bounty on him. Rhett's jaw tensed. What does that mean for us? The marshal adjusted his coat. Means if he gets wind, you've made the kids yours. He may come back out of spite. Men like that control is their pride. Take it from M and they get reckless. Ellie stepped down off the porch. What do? You don't do anything, the marshal said. We'll handle it. Got 3 poses out sweeping. Last sign of him was in the ravine north of Hollow Creek. He mounted up, tipping his hat. But if he does come back, send word fast. He won't get far. He rode out, leaving behind nothing but the muddy tracks of his horse and the silent weight of the words he carried. Rhett didn't speak again for a long while. He watched the reins settle into the grass and turned back toward the cabin. That evening, he sat the children down at the table, not with bread or soup or cornbread, like usual, but with a paper spread out in front of them, the ink still sharp, the seal still unbroken. He pointed to the names listed. See that? Jamie squinted. That says Lark. That's right. And this, he tapped another line. Jamie, the boy shouted. And Owen and May, all of you. He drew a breath and looked them square in the eye. This says, I'm your papa now, not just in your hearts, but in the eyes of the whole world. Hazel blinked hard. Lark clapped. Bee stood on his chair and started dancing until Ellie caught him mid-leap and pulled him back down. Owen didn't say anything, just reached across the table and grabbed Rhett's wrist. You always were. That night they had sweet bread and boiled apples. Ellie made coffee that didn't taste like wood chips. And when the children were finally asleep, Rhett stepped out onto the porch and stared into the dark. He didn't need to say it aloud. He knew Magnus Cole was coming, not because the marshal warned him, not because of the bounty, but because broken men always returned to the thing they couldn't accept losing. Rhett had won. He'd claimed something Magnus Cole never could, family, and that made him a threat. Ellie stepped outside, joining him in the cool hush of night. We need to prepare, she said. He nodded. By morning, the plan was already laid. They didn't speak of it around the children, but Hazel knew. Owen, too. Children raised in hard places understood danger without needing words. Ellie sharpened the knives. Rhett checked the old rifle and the revolver he'd stored under the floorboards back when he first arrived. 3 days passed. Nothing. Then on the 4th, Owen came sprinting from the North Ridge just as the sun was setting. I saw him, he gasped. He's up by the forked pine. Rhett didn't ask how far. He knew exactly where that tree stood. They gave the children one final supper, told them stories, smiled like the sky wasn't burning with stormlight, and when the cabin had gone quiet again, Rhett pulled Ellie close. If it's him or me, he said, don't hesitate. Her jaw clenched. I won't. They didn't sleep. At dawn, a horse came down the ridge, slow picking its steps like it knew the land. Magnus Cole sat the saddle with the ease of someone who didn't expect to be challenged. He stopped at the fence and waited. Rhett stepped outside. The man hadn't aged much. Still wore that same long coat, same cruel smirk, but his eyes were hollow hour now, and his right hand twitched against the saddle horn like he was itching for a fight. "Come to steal something again?" Rhett asked. Magnus Cole's smile twisted. "No, come to take back what's mine." Rhett stepped down into the yard. They were never yours. Not the kids, not the woman, the land. He gestured toward the hills. "This used to be mine before you squatted on it." "You abandoned it," Rhett said, "just like you abandoned them." Magnus Cole spat into the dirt. "I'm done talking." "So am I." The shot cracked before Magnus Cole could draw. Rhett's rifle kicked once, then fell still. Magnus Cole slid off the saddle like a rag hitting the ground with a dull thud. The horse didn't spook. It just stood there, as if even the animal had stopped fearing him long ago. Rhett walked down and checked the body. No pulse. Ellie appeared beside him a moment later, her hands shaking, not with fear, but release. Owen came running. "Is it over?" Rhett looked at the children gathered behind the porch rail. He nodded. "It's over." They buried Magnus Cole beneath the forked pine. No marker, no prayer, only silence. In the days that followed, the air grew lighter. The soil felt less like a burden and more like a promise. Spring had come. Ellie began planting again. Corn, squash, wildflower. The twins built a scarecrow with Hazel and painted its face like a clown. Rhett fixed the west fence and found himself whistling without meaning to. He didn't need to look over his shoulder anymore. Not because the danger was gone, but because home was no longer something he feared losing. It was something they had all built together with sweat, tears, and stubborn hope, and no one, not even the devil himself, could tear that down again. The years passed, not like a blur, but like a story told in chapters, each season its own page. Every drought or harvest, a paragraph scrolled in memory. The ranch, which once stood as a quiet patch of dust and silence beneath a sky too wide for comfort, had become something else entirely alive. Rhett had lived through blood and fire to build that place into a home, and now it breathed with the laughter of children, the hush of wind through full-grown trees, the rhythm of work that didn't feel like burden anymore. Spring turned to summer and then into autumn, and still the children grew. Lark had long since outgrown her wild braids and started helping Ellie in the kitchen, her flour-dusted hands shaping pies that tasted like something from heaven. Jamie was taller now. His knees always scraped his shirt, always half-ducked, and his voice full of questions Rhett never minded answering. Owen grew quieter as the years wore on, not because he was troubled, but because he saw things, took them in, understood the weight of silence the same way some men understood scripture. Hazel was nearly a woman by then, taller than Ellie strong, in the shoulders from hauling feed and chopping wood. She laughed often, but she could command a room with just one look when it was needed. She helped Rhett with the fencing and could ride the fastest of all of them. The colt she'd trained at 15 now carried her like it was bred for war, but she rode it like a whisper. That horse would buck anyone else to the sky, but Hazel. Hazel rode like she'd been born in a saddle. Ellie stayed, of course. After Magnus Cole, after the land settled, she stopped pretending like she had anywhere else to go. She never asked Rhett to marry her, and he never asked her either, not out of fear or hesitation, but because they had already crossed that line long ago. It wasn't a ring that made them bound. It was the way she tucked his boots inside when storms rolled in, the way he never turned in without making sure her hands were warm. They were husband and wife in every way that mattered. There was a fire one summer of the 5th year started up in the ridge where lightning cracked a dry pine. The wind carried it down fast, too fast for the townsfolk to stop it alone. But they didn't have to, because when the call went out, the Lawson homestead sent riders Rhett and Jamie and Owen, with buckets strapped to saddles and Hazel leading them like a general. They didn't lose a single home that year. Folks talked about it for months, called them the quiet family with storm in their hearts. But not all storms were fought with flame. One winter word came through that a group of orphans had been snowed in south of River's Gap, their caretakers gone sick with fever. Rhett was nearly 50, then his beard gray at the jaw, but he didn't blink. He hitched up the wagon and rode through 3 mi of snow with Ellie beside him, and Lark wrapped tight in wool, handing out biscuits to each child like it was the Last Supper. Jamie brought laughter with him, like always carrying the smallest kids on his shoulders. They spent 2 weeks nursing the sick back to health. Nobody died, and when it was done, they rode back home without waiting for thanks. There were moments that came unexpected, two small quiet ones that stuck longer than the louder memories. Like the day Owen finally asked to call Rhett Papa out loud. It was during harvest while he was hauling sacks of potatoes. He said it like it had always been true, like the years of silence had been a gift, not a wound. Or the time Lark ran in crying because she'd seen a baby bird fall from its nest, and Rhett's hands, calloused from fixing the west fence, climbed that tree with the gentleness of a man touching something sacred. He put the bird back without a word, and Lark watched him like he was some kind of angel in flannel. Jamie got into trouble once. Nothing too serious, just a fight behind the schoolhouse, after someone made a remark about the twins not having a real father. Jamie didn't come home bruised, but the other boy did. Rhett didn't scold him. He sat him down and asked if his fists solved anything. Jamie said no, then cried. Rhett held him until the tears passed and made him write an apology, not to the boy, but to his sister. Because Rhett told him, every time you lift your fist for her, you're saying she can't stand up on her own, and you know better. The ranch kept growing. Rhett added 2 more barns, expanded the chicken coos, built a windmill from scrap parts that kept the water pump going, even during drought. They started taking in travelers, more often men, who had nothing, women running from something. Rhett never asked where they came from. He only asked if they were hungry. Ellie started keeping records, names, birthdays, recipes passed down from wandering women who didn't know where else to leave them. That ledger grew thick over the years. And by the 10th year, it was full of names no one else remembered but her. Names Rhett spoke in prayer every night when he sat on the porch after supper. And one night under a blood-orange sky, Jamie came to him quiet and serious. I want to take the name. Rhett didn't understand at first. I mean it, Jamie said. I don't want to be just B. I want to be Jamie Lawson. Rhett blinked against the dusk. You sure? I've always been, just didn't know how to ask. Rhett nodded slow, then reached out and pulled him into the kind of hug that only fathers gave. The kind that spoke of protection, pride, and something bigger than both. Lark followed 2 weeks later. Owen didn't say a word about it, but one Sunday morning, Ellie found the corner of his Bible marked with a scrolled name, Owen Lawson. She didn't say anything either, just smiled and baked his favorite pie. Years passed. The house aged. The porch sagged a little. The trees thickened. The mountains didn't change much, but the people did. Children became adults. Adults became something stronger. Rhett sat one day with a child on his lap, not one of his own, but a girl from a family passing through. She asked him, "Is this your home?" He looked out at the fields, the fencing, the barn standing proud. He saw the firewood stacked by Owen, the flowers Lark planted under the windows, the lopsided scarecrow still clinging to life after a decade of wind. He smiled. "No," he said, "it's our home." And in the doorway stood Ellie, her gray hair pinned back, apron still dusted with flour. Jamie and Lark were racing horses past the hill. Owen had just returned from town with 2 more crates of books. Hazel was splitting wood behind the house sleeves, rolled boot-stained hair braided tight. That night, Rhett sat beside Ellie, their knees touching the sky wide and soft. "Funny," she said, sipping coffee. "All them years ago, you didn't even have a place to lay your head." He chuckled. "And now," she said, taking his hand, "you're the pillar we all lean on." They didn't need more words. Not that night, because they both knew what the children had said that started it all. We ain't got a papa, and you ain't got a home. Now they had both, and they would for the rest of their days.